On November 30th, 2025, the Black Sea appeared calm in the early morning hours. A thin layer of haze rested low over the water, softening the horizon and muting the colors of the sea. Commercial shipping traffic continued as usual. Oil tankers and cargo vessels moved along established maritime routes that had been used for decades. Navigation systems showed no warnings. Radar screens displayed routine contacts. To most observers, this stretch of water looked no different from countless mornings before. Yet beneath this calm surface, the Black Sea was operating under growing tension shaped by months of conflict, sanctions, and expanding maritime risk. The Black Sea has long been a critical route for global energy and trade. It connects Russian export terminals, Ukrainian ports, Turkish straits, and international shipping lanes that feed into the Mediterranean. Since 2022, when wide-ranging sanctions were imposed on Russian oil exports following the invasion of Ukraine, this region has become increasingly complex. Oil continues to move, but often through indirect systems designed to avoid restrictions. One of the most discussed elements of this system is what analysts call Russia's shadow fleet. The shadow fleet is not a formal organization. It has no single owner, headquarters, or command structure. Instead, it consists of hundreds of older oil tankers operating under various flags of convenience. These ships are often registered in countries with limited regulatory oversight and rely on complex ownership structures that make accountability difficult. Many of them operate with unclear insurance arrangements or coverage provided by smaller insurers outside traditional Western markets. Their purpose is simple: to keep Russian oil flowing to global buyers despite sanctions and price caps. On the morning of November 30th, two such tankers were operating in the Black Sea. The first, named Kairos, was moving through the southwestern part of the sea, not far from the Turkish coastline. The second, Virat, was located farther east in a more central area of the Black Sea. Both vessels were flagged to Gambia, a detail that immediately attracted attention from maritime analysts. Flags of convenience are legal under international law, but they are frequently used by ships seeking to minimize scrutiny, especially in sanctioned trade. At the time, neither tanker reported any unusual activity. Their speeds were consistent with large oil carriers transporting cargo. Their routes followed established maritime corridors used by tankers traveling between export terminals and transit points leading toward the Bosphorus Strait. From the bridge of each vessel, conditions appeared normal. The sea was relatively calm. Visibility was limited by haze, but not enough to raise concern. There were no alerts from coastal authorities and no immediate indication of danger. However, the wider context told a different story. In the weeks leading up to November 30th, activity across the Black Sea had increased noticeably. Ukrainian ports had been targeted earlier in the conflict, but attention had increasingly shifted toward maritime infrastructure and shipping routes. Russian export facilities, including ports linked to the Caspian Pipeline Consortium near Novorossiysk, had experienced disruptions. Some of these disruptions were caused by unmanned surface vessels, commonly referred to as naval drones. Ukraine has invested heavily in unmanned maritime systems since the start of the war. These systems are designed to compensate for Ukraine's lack of a traditional large navy. Ukrainian naval drones are small, fast, and difficult to detect at long range. They operate close to the waterline, reducing their radar signature, and are capable of traveling long distances using pre-programmed navigation systems. Some models are designed for reconnaissance, while others are built to carry explosive payloads. These drones are launched from coastal areas under Ukrainian control. Before launch, operators program precise routes based on distance, speed, fuel capacity, and expected sea conditions. Once deployed, the drone follows its programmed path autonomously, with operators monitoring its progress remotely. This method reduces the need for continuous control and allows drones to travel deep into contested waters. Commercial vessels like oil tankers are not equipped to defend themselves against such threats. They rely on international maritime safety systems, communication with coastal authorities, and, in some cases, naval patrols for protection. However, in international waters, responsibility for security is limited. Tankers are designed for transport efficiency, not combat. Their size, Slow speed and large radar profiles make them vulnerable to small, fast-moving threats. As the Kairos continued its transit near the Turkish coast, a new object appeared on the surface of the water. It was small and moving quickly, creating only a narrow wake. Its low profile made it difficult to detect until it was already close. This object was later identified as a Ukrainian naval drone. The approach happened rapidly. The drone moved directly toward the tanker, maintaining speed and direction. There was little time for evasive action. Large oil tankers cannot maneuver quickly, especially when fully loaded. By the time the threat became clear, the distance between the drone and the Kairos had closed to a point where avoidance was no longer possible. When the drone struck the hull, it detonated on impact. The explosion was sharp and violent, producing flames and thick smoke that rose into the air. The blast damaged the outer structure of the tanker, igniting a fire along the hull. Emergency procedures were initiated immediately. The crew sent distress signals through established maritime channels, alerting nearby authorities and vessels. Turkish coastal emergency services responded quickly. Firefighting boats were dispatched to the scene, prioritizing containment. Fires involving oil tankers are especially dangerous due to the risk of cargo ignition. Fire crews focused on cooling the affected areas of the hull and preventing the flames from spreading. Water streams were directed carefully to reduce heat without destabilizing the structure of the vessel. After sustained efforts, the visible flames were brought under control. No casualties were reported. The damage to the tanker was significant but did not result in a total loss. Once the fire subsided, the extent of the structural damage became clearer, allowing authorities to begin assessment and stabilization procedures. While emergency crews were still dealing with the aftermath of the Kairos incident, events were unfolding elsewhere in the Black Sea. In a central region of the sea, the tanker Virat was continuing its transit. Like the Kairos, it followed standard shipping routes and reported no irregularities. However, a similar contact appeared on the water nearby. This second drone mirrored the behavior of the first. It traveled in a straight line, maintained high speed, and remained close to the surface to minimize detection. The distance between the drone and the Virat steadily decreased. Again, the tanker had little opportunity to react. When the drone reached the hull of the Virat, it detonated. The explosion caused a fire visible from a considerable distance. Smoke rose vertically before spreading across the surface of the sea. Emergency responses were triggered, and footage of the incident was captured by monitoring systems and later verified by international media organizations. The release of video footage played a critical role in confirming the nature of the attacks. The recordings clearly showed unmanned surface vessels approaching the tankers and detonating on impact. Analysts were able to assess the drone's speed, trajectory, and behavior. These visuals removed much of the uncertainty surrounding the incidents and reinforced concerns about the expanding use of unmanned systems in maritime conflict. The consequences of these attacks extended far beyond the damaged vessels. Almost immediately, insurance markets reacted. War risk insurance premiums for ships operating in the Black Sea increased sharply. Brokers noted heightened demand for updated coverage, particularly among vessels linked to Russian trade. In some cases, insurance costs rose to levels that made certain routes economically unviable. Even ships not directly involved in sanctioned trade began reassessing their operations. The unpredictability of unmanned attacks created uncertainty that affected the entire maritime industry. Some operators chose to divert routes or delay shipments. Others increased reporting frequency and monitoring to reduce risk. Industry experts warned that these incidents represented a broader shift. The use of relatively low-cost unmanned systems to target high-value commercial assets changed the risk calculation for maritime trade. A single drone, costing far less than a traditional missile, could cause millions of dollars in damage and disrupt global supply chains. Reports also referenced a separate incident involving a tanker off the coast of Senegal that suffered multiple explosions. While Ukrainian involvement in that case was not confirmed, the event raised concerns about the potential spread of similar tactics beyond the Black Sea. Maritime security experts emphasized that unmanned surface vessels could be deployed in other regions where monitoring and defenses are limited. In the days following the Black Sea strikes, monitoring systems tracked ship movements closely. Automatic identification system data showed continued activity, but with noticeable changes. Some vessels slowed their transit, others altered routes slightly to avoid perceived high-risk zones. Ports reviewed safety procedures and emergency readiness. At the same time, diplomatic activity continued on land. Ukraine engaged with international partners, including discussions in the United States, led by Defense Minister Rustem Umerov. These talks focused on broader aspects of the conflict, including military support and strategic coordination. While negotiations and meetings took place far from the sea, maritime activity followed its own set of rules and realities. Naval drone operations are governed by careful planning and authorization. Each deployment requires technical preparation, route programming, and coordination with broader strategic objectives. For Ukraine, these systems represent a way to project power in a contested maritime environment without deploying traditional naval forces. For Turkey, the incidents highlighted its role as a key maritime authority in the Black Sea. Turkish emergency response followed international maritime safety regulations, prioritizing life and environmental protection, regardless of the vessel's origin. This neutrality is essential to maintaining stability in a region where military and commercial interests intersect. For Russia and Kazakhstan, damage to infrastructure and disruptions to shipping triggered established procedures for assessment and adjustment. Export schedules were reviewed, and repair efforts began where necessary. For shipping companies and insurers, risk analysis became the primary focus, influencing decisions about future operations in the region. The Black Sea has always been a space where routine commerce and geopolitical tension coexist. Tankers travel predictable routes, but the conditions surrounding those routes can change rapidly. A drone appearing on the surface, a port halting operations, or an insurance rate spike can alter the balance overnight. The events involving the Kairos and Virat demonstrated how modern conflict increasingly blurs the line between military and commercial domains. 2 tankers were struck. Emergency crews acted quickly. No lives were lost, but the psychological and economic impact extended far beyond the immediate damage. As shipping continued, in the days that followed, the Black Sea returned to its familiar rhythm of movement and monitoring. Yet the sense of uncertainty remained. Each vessel crossing these waters now does so with heightened awareness. Each decision carries new weight. What happened on November 30th, 2025, was not just a pair of isolated incidents. It was part of a broader evolution in maritime security, where unmanned systems, economic pressure, and global trade intersect. And as the Black Sea moved on to its next day, the balance between routine and risk continued to define every mile of open water.